Of your 45 publications, what was your favorite, and why is it your favorite?
Then at the end, like right before I graduated, I was like, I want to do something for myself. But at the same time, I think maybe that the lesson to the younger folks is,
because I want to put this in some context for people, because I think you're downplaying what you did a lot. Those are really the things that lead to new ideas, and you might not think as many people saw that as did, but there are a lot of people who did similar activities down the road.
If they haven't yet, hopefully they will now.
Exactly.
Yeah. They'll know. Ask me about, how should I get started? How should I grow my career? Who can mentor me?
The very first mentoring sessions I have with the young scientists is I ask them to divide the people into 3 groups.
Welcome to the BioTalk Unzipped podcast, where we unzip the stories behind medical progress by sharing the latest and greatest advances in biopharmaceuticals and medical technologies in a fun, entertaining, and enlightening format. And now your co-hosts, Gregory Austin and Dr. Chad Briscoe. Of your 45 publications, what was your favorite, and why is it your favorite?
I can tell you which one's most cited, but not necessarily is. It's kind of interesting. What you really enjoy publishing and what you are most famously known for are very different things. I will say maybe instead of being disparaging my own publication, I will kind of look a little bit more back toward my graduate school career. So in my graduate school career, when I was a graduate student, I had obviously I have to work under an investigator, a boss, and she actually have a requirement to the student how many papers you have to publish before you are essentially determined to be sufficiently qualified to earn your doctors. So,
and who was your advisor? Who was your thesis
It was
advisor?
Jenny Broadbelt. She is a.
Oh, it was. Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, yeah.
So she's actually she's a big shot and very well known in the mass spec community.
Yeah, huge.
So
huge.
When I went into her lab, I came from a background. I worked a little bit when I was in college. So I worked in a lab. I built my own HPLC. So I loved HPLC. So I was like, oh, this is so cool. I really like it. I really like the technology and how it makes it work. So I went over there. I basically told her, I said, hey, Jenny, I want to do something about LC. I really want to do something. She's like, I'm in a mass spec field. We don't really do LC at all. So, and her concentration actually was known as ion molecule reaction. So it's entirely a gas phase type of environment to how the molecule interact in a vacuum. So she said, she told me that's pretty far away from HPLC. This is really not my research area. So in the first 4.5 years of my career, I essentially dutifully followed her instruction, and we did all these ion molecule reactions, ab initio calculations. To me, I thought it was pretty boring stuff. Don't tell her that, but very physical, chemical, and we got onto some pretty good journals like JACS and Underhill Chemistry. Then at the end, like right before I graduated, I was like, I want to do something for myself. So I told her I really want to get it, build a HPLC. I want to build the electrospray interface to hook them up together. I did it, and I was able to get it published. And coming back now, looking at that paper, I think was really horribly done. I did not have the equipment. I did not have the technology or even the idea how to publish in the separation area. I mean, it did get published in Analyst, like a British journal, and it didn't get cited very often either. Yeah. But that's probably the publication I'm most proud of. But it's also a publication nobody knows about because it kind of goes back to doing something you really enjoy. And I kind of feel like I did 90% of my PhD for my advisor to get a degree. Then I did 10% for myself because I really enjoy doing it. Mm-hmm. So it's very interesting where your interest, what you like, can lead you to. But at the same time, I think maybe that the lesson to the younger folks is what you enjoy may not necessarily 100% be what you end up doing, which is okay. Mm-hmm. I think from a career development perspective, you want to derive enjoyment from everything you do, but you should also not give up your dream. You can insert, I guess, what you like into your everyday job, every little pieces at a time.
So, Jim, I'm pretty sure I know about what year that was. Do you mind me asking? Because I want to put this in some context for people, because I think you're downplaying what you did a lot.
So I think that was
What
like
year
in
was it?
the 19, I want to say 1998, 1999 time frame,
98,
1999, maybe
99 when
90,
you were
yeah,
doing that?
97,
Okay.
98, 99.
Okay.
So that's
Yeah.
right about
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
electroscreen
So that
become
was,
popular. I mean, we did some
yep.
stuff, but
Yep.
most of my publication in the biological area really didn't come into focus
Hmm.
until I got to Shen. And we
Okay.
did the very first
Yep.
publication for UPLC in bioanalysis. We did quite a bit of work on ion suppression. Though, all those things I'm
Hmm.
very
Hmm.
proud of. But it's funny, it's the little things that kind of remind you why you started working on something that may not be what you're known for or remembered by.
Yeah, well, and I don't think I'm either known for or remembered for stability and assessments in bioanalysis, but I know by far the most cited paper I ever wrote was in the first issue of Bioanalysis, and it was simply a review on stability considerations and regulated bioanalysis or something like that. And then, you write a review like that, and those are the things that get tons of citations, because probably anybody after me that wrote something
Cited you,
similarly, of which there have
absolutely.
been many, they cite that. So yeah, what people know and what they cite and becomes aware isn't always yeah, what you're most proud of. But I also think achievements like you did with putting together an LCMS, really, I mean, you put an HPLC in the front of a mass spec, and it probably wasn't an HPLC or a mass spec that were meant to be paired together, and you're kind of building your own interface. Those are really the things that lead to new ideas, and you might not think as many people saw that as did, but there are a lot of people who did similar activities down the road, and I bet a lot more people read that than you realize.
Yeah,
I'm not one of them.
probably true, Chad.
And if they haven't yet, hopefully they will now after hearing this.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. They'll know.
I might post it on LinkedIn.
This is the paper nobody thought to read, and it's horrible, but Jim was very proud of it.
Oh man.
You talk about earlier in your career and some interesting things you did, and then it kind of led to the next and the next to, following the breadcrumbs to where you are today. I sometimes get these questions from aspiring young pharmaceutical scientists because they see the show. But I'm curious, they ask me about, boy, how should I get started? How should I grow my career? Who can mentor me? From your experience, what advice would you give someone asking that question?
Wow, I mean, this is going to be a huge question about mentorship. So mentorship is very interesting. I mentor a lot of young scientists, both in my group as well as in the industry. There are a couple type of people I see that's not as successful in the industry as these people should be. First of all, Chad knows that like we deal with very smart people. We deal with very smart individual who has a very high degree and accomplishment in our career, and these people have already accomplished a
Hmm.
lot in their career. And what happens is, unfortunately, certain people kind of sit on their laurels and kind of want to say, "Hey, I deserve this, right?" And because I have gotten to somewhere, I think maybe one of the most important thing is recognizing whoever you're working with, whoever's around you, their success, their knowledge, and their expertise are important to your success. Very first, the mentoring sessions I have with the young scientists is I ask them to divide the people into three groups: champions, allies, and the sponsors. Sponsor are those with the power, can change your career. Those people don't come along very often, but you need to really grab them when you see them. A mentor, you should have a lot because many people have more experience than you and have a life lesson to impart. You should not take everything at their at the face value. You should have many mentors. Then you should like maybe take all their knowledge and synthesize to see what works, what doesn't work for you. The last one is allies, or really build a network of people that's going to say good things about you and promote your career and are your allies and can back you up when somebody asks. A lot of people kind of feel like they're already successful. They don't understand they're no longer successful when they advance to the next layer. The correct behavior is always, regardless which layer you are on, you're competing with a brand new team of people. The same lessons apply. Learn, be cordial, and understand the human relationship. EQ is so important in being successful in your larger pharmaceutical company. So unfortunately, a lot of students don't exit university with that particular set of training at all. So
Mm-hmm.
some people you can tell are going to be really, really good just from one meeting. Some people you have to do a lot of work with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What would you suggest that they early on try to develop their EQ or their emotional quotient so they can better read people and better work with people that they may be very different from them or just difficult to work with?
I think a couple different things. First of all, I think if you feel like an introvert, read, look at YouTube videos. There are so many things out there these days. There are so many resources. Even you don't want to
Mm-hmm.
take all of them, at least some of them is going to be very helpful, right? So the other thing is, regardless how much a dismays you or you're scared of it, you have to reach out to people. You have to talk to people. You have to make friends. You have to learn from people, and you have to not be afraid to approach the unknown and talk to people. So I think that's maybe the most important thing: is get out of your shell, get out of your office, talk to people, make friends, get suggestions, and continue to grow. I think the growth is something you will never stop. Just because I'm not at this position doesn't mean there are things I cannot learn. And obviously, I think be curious. I think that's important. Assimilate all different things, read all different books, and listen to your podcast.
Yeah.
Be curious, not judgmental. That's one of my
Yeah.
favorite quotes,
Yeah.
Walt Whitman. And now I agree absolutely that there's endless resources on YouTube, and 98% of them are free. There's one that comes to mind. Charisma on Command has a good library of different ways people can improve their interactions and how they deal with situations or deal with people and so forth. And I kind of wonder, from the outside looking in, I've worked for big companies, I've worked for small companies, I haven't worked inside a large pharmaceutical company, but there's a group that people should be aware of, thinking about, because you mentioned their champions, your sponsors, and your allies. What about adversaries? I look at this industry from my experience, and it may be through rose-colored glasses because it's so collegial. People have this group, this combined mentality of making life better for other people through drug development. But are there adversaries, and how should you be aware of and deal with those types of people?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Greg. I think that's also a very interesting question. I think there is, at least to me, just purely my opinion, there's no forever enemy, there's no forever friend. So you really, I think, human in general, like from a nature of humanity, we are, I would say, collaborative creatures by birth. So it's built into us, want to belong to a group. It's built into us, we want to collaborate because that's what built into every single successful human being through its gene pool. There are people you're not going to get along with. That's okay, but do not hold a grudge for very long. I would say try to put yourself in other people's shoe. There are people absolutely you cannot stand, which is also okay. But I would say don't. First of all, try not to take it personally. There are things that you probably should take personally, but for most of the work thing, you should not take personally. You really should view it from professional lens. We are not all going to agree on everything, but I would say take a step back, take a deep breath. If something doesn't work out, move on to something else. If this person you cannot deal with, take a deep breath and move on to something else. Maybe in a few months or a few years, that situation is going to change. So, like I said, there's no forever enemy or forever adversary, and hopefully that we don't have to get to a point that you hold a grudge for a long. I mean, look, life's too short for that.
Yep.
And I've seen those adversaries, those difficult people that you really don't want to work with or didn't enjoy working with. Once you kind of peel back the onion a little bit and you find the common connection, all of a sudden they can become an ally or at least a very workable colleague, right? And I kind of equate it to a professional sports a little bit because, very intense, it's very competitive, and you have to be careful because that person who's your adversary today, maybe you shouldn't be talking them so much because they could be your teammate tomorrow.
Yeah. Or Travis Kelce, who is, he listens to this podcast, by the way, Jim. I didn't know if you knew that, but Travis Kelce, who doesn't miss an episode of this podcast, he runs a tight end camp, right? And that's kind of a big thing that he does. He brings tight ends from all over all the NFL teams just to make all the tight ends in the NFL better. And it's like, wait a second, you're in, and I think bioanalytical, we're a little bit like that, depending on what level you're at. Again, Jim, I think you talked about as you move up and you step up in the field, I think it's really important for young people to reach out across to different companies. If you're in a CRO, don't be afraid to talk to somebody who runs a mass spec in another CRO or in the pharma and working across that. I was thinking this week, I was exchanging text messages with two of my peers that run similarly sized bioanalytical CRO departments in companies, and they had a couple of questions, and I asked them a couple of questions, and it's just going to make us both better. It's not going to neither of us is going to put the other one out of business because we're competitors, but we're both going to come across better, and those relationships are so valuable, right? And I think the people who don't explore those opportunities they're just not going to be as successful, and their company's not going to be as successful because of it. So I know BMS has always been a company I've looked at that you see a lot of that collaboration, and that's been for really forever. As BMS has evolved and had different CEOs, it's always been a highly collaborative company. You always see involvement in different societies and speakers and supporting meetings and things like that. So yeah, I love that question. I love this topic. Yeah.
Fantastic. It's a great analogy. Thanks for sharing that, Chad.
And thanks, Travis. Thanks, Travis, for watching the show.
Shout out.
Hope we can make Taylor a big fan as well.
So it's time once again, Chad, for new news.
New news.
In the article, following FDA rejection, a journal retracts paper on MDMA-assisted therapy is recently published by Jacob Bell in Biopharma Dive, and it discussed that last Friday the FDA rejected MDMA as a psychedelic therapy aid for PTSD, also known as the street drug ecstasy, and was also followed by the retraction of 3 related scientific papers by Psychopharmacology. And the retractions were due to undisclosed ethical violations at the clinical testing site, which were pretty bad, where data from the site was also included despite the known protocol violations. Additionally, potential conflicts of interest were not properly disclosed by the authors. Lykos Therapeutics, which is the company involved, disagrees with the retractions and have filed a complaint for further review. It would have been the first psychedelic assisted therapy to ever get approved in the US. It's a huge blow to those who support psychedelic therapies. Even Congress is hoping that the data would be good enough and sound enough for approval because despite the current therapeutic efforts, there's about 6,000 vets approximately that commit suicide every year, and it's just not getting better.
Yeah.
Jim, what is your opinion about psychedelics as a drug therapy, and how significant a blow is it to a company of those journal articles retracted?
So a couple of different things. First of all, I'm not going to be an expert in this area by any stretch of imagination. So psychedelics. So I think regardless of psychedelics or some kind of, supplement, right? There has to be a set of scientific principle you have to follow. There has to be a process you have to follow to gain legitimacy. This does not help the drug or the compound in any way. Because if you already are seeking legitimacy, then you have been caught red-handed in faking scientific data. Then that's not going to bode well, I would say, not only from agencies' oversight of your area's perspective, but also just the general area is going to carry I would say, a black mark for a long time. I think, Greg, you asked another question in the back. I just want to make sure I address that one as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I asked you about your opinions about psychedelics themselves, and I think you addressed how would that having an article, not just one but three retracted, really affect your legitimacy. And I agree, it's devastating, and unfortunately for those who might have had some positive effects, in the clinical trials from those drugs, that it would accompany by the cognitive therapy or the behavioral therapies that go along with it. But it's just, I don't see that, probably getting much traction anytime in the near future.
Yeah, and I hope that it doesn't damage, because that did make really big news, and I hope it doesn't damage this area of research in general, right? I mean, for the company, it's probably really, really bad news if they can't kind of right the ship and figure it out. But whether it's cannabis research, real medical cannabis, or psilocybin, which is essentially the mushrooms, right? Magic mushrooms, or MDMA, and other drugs. There's these drugs are making a difference in your neurological function. And if we can find a way that that's positive at the right dose in the right, management, then I would hate to see the research in this area be stunted, because I do think it's an area with with tremendous promise. So, but at the same time, as Jim said, and it was my first reaction to this, is in this industry, we have to make really hard decisions to do things right. And sometimes that means things don't move forward in the way that we want them to. We get results from a clinical trial that that you wonder, geez, would anybody? It's just science, right? Would anybody know if I just skated over this, or what does this really make a difference? And that's where we got to bring all of these things forward, and then work through them again together, tremendously collaborative industry. But man, you see the cheaters getting caught all the time. I hope they're all caught. And I don't, maybe this company is or isn't cheating. I guess that's the little disclaimer for me. Obviously, I don't, we don't know all the ins and outs. But I hope, I just hope it doesn't damage the research in this space, because man, those drugs sure did sound exciting and interesting.
Right. And some of those clinical data sounded promising,
Yeah.
and especially within those publications. Mm-hmm. But I thought it curious that they didn't use the same data in the publications in their NDA, filing.
It sounds pretty bad.
It does.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're going to recover, but again, I hope it doesn't leave a black mark on the idea of the research. Yeah. There may be something there, even if microdosing some of these compounds make a difference.
Yeah.
It's a real problem that we all know is prevalent, and we're just scratching for answers to help these folks for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And as Jim was talking about earlier with the protein degraders, early in the discussion, BMS is on their fourth generation of these drugs, right? So you do these iterations in development, and there are failures, and you have to take the failure and then adjust and improve. And I guess, Jim, you were saying that one of those is on the market, but I also know that often we'll see drugs in development that it'll be this is version A, and then it fails at some point, and then we get version B, and it makes it a little bit further, and version C, and then finally maybe it is only the fourth or fifth iteration of that molecule for that target that actually makes it to market. So,
yeah, I mean, I think a very good point. I think it's very expensive to do this type of research, and it's very unfortunate if you, if the legitimacy of research is called into question. I think that's really going to damage the perception not only of the legitimacy of the research and the area itself, but also from a funding perspective. I mean, you're going to have Wall Street that have to fund this type of very expensive research. If they cannot trust for you to deliver that in a truthful manner, that's going to have a financial impact.
Yeah. And I don't know if I was going to, sorry, Greg, I was going to say one other thing. The clinical trials for these types of drugs are extremely challenging as well, because the endpoints aren't measurements, right? They aren't things Jim and I do in our lab most of the time. They're how much do you like it? How do you feel? Do you feel better? Did you sleep well last night? Things like that. And so that just confounds that and makes it so much more important to be above board. So just, another thought. Go ahead. We can kind of switch gears.
Yeah, no, indeed, because you're right. There are more subjective measures. How many panic attacks have you had last week compared to the week before?
Yeah.
It is very difficult, and there's a lot more subjectivity to that in self-reporting.
Yeah.
So continue to hope it gets better, gets better over time. Good. To switch gears a little bit, Jim, we always like to get to know, something about the personal interests of the folks we have on the show. And I see the cameras in the background. Are you a photographer? Is that something you like to do?
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for asking that. So a couple of things I do. I'm a pretty big gamer. So I play role-playing games, and I actually, for the longest time, I don't play it anymore, but I probably played World of Warcraft for 15 years. So I actually ran a pretty large and successful guild for a number of years. So I used to joke to my group. I said everything I learned about the management I learned from World of Warcraft guild. So actually, there's quite a bit of truth to that, because the social interaction the online game actually offers these days are so colored and so varied and so nuanced. Managing an online interaction really is no different, or not as difficult. I mean, it's just as difficult as managing a large group. So in that sense, I think maybe the kids are onto something. From that sense. The other thing, obviously, I'm a big photographer. I think really probably it's one of those things. I'm not an artist by any stretch of imagination, but kind of like bring the art and science together. Photography is fairly technical with all the gears and learning the things, learning how to take pictures, various settings on the camera. So you put all that together, kind of indulges my artistic side together with my curiosity with machinery and with technology. Unfortunately, it's kind of like becoming a lost art, because taking picture, really now everybody has a phone, and kind of like a photography is being enjoyed by less and less people. But hopefully something that will enjoy a resurgence once everything digital, that fad comes over, because people, I'm a deep believer, people will always read books because just for the tactile feeling of holding a book. Not because I'm so old, I actually read the paper books. But hopefully, I actually see and look on YouTube, there are kids now actually want to pick up a film camera and want to play with it, because it's something their father, grandfather used to do. And it's cool, it's something tactical you can feel, it's something tactile, has that feeling, has that, you're creating something, has that background. And I think there are people now, I think, some of these film cameras or film photography are enjoying a resurgence. My understanding is Kodak just started a couple more plants making films because they cannot keep up with the demand.
Oh,
so
okay.
That's interesting, because I know when they were behind the eight ball when it came to developing digital cameras, they thought this will never be a thing, and it became a thing, and that hurt them a lot. So I'm kind of glad to hear films coming back, because there's certainly an art to putting that image on a physical, piece of
and
paper.
actually kids, millennials, maybe not millennial, Gen Zs, right? They are my kids' age. They have never really done anything analog. Their whole lives lived on digital. Actually, there is a active pushback, or there is a rebellion against everything digital, because they don't want to have their whole life to be only on a memory disk. They really want to have something they can hold, they can touch. So I think film photography, my understanding, is enjoying a resurgence.
What are your favorite subjects?
I actually shoot a very technical subject matter called the infrared photography. So I have multiple camera that's converted. So basically for the light spectrum, you have the visible light. Then beyond about 620, 640 nanometers, it's a region called infrared. That actually typically you cannot see because that's beyond the human visible vision range. So camera have this thing called a hard mirror filter. They put in front of the digital camera to filter out that, because they want to reproduce with the human eye see. But actually the silicon can see all the way up to 11 or 1200 nanometers. So you can have your camera converted by a company to remove the hard mirror filter. Then the camera become what's known IR sensitive. Then you can take pictures of essentially the invisible spectrum of light. And I may even be able to have a few pictures I can send to you for you to look.
Yeah.
The light is very different because the trees, like the leaves, when they're alive, they reflect 100% our light. So the subject matter, if you shoot a tree, regardless of season, all the leaves are completely white. And in the sky, because if there's no water vapor, there's zero air reflectance. So the sky will be dark black, but the cloud will be sharply white. So it's a very
Wow.
it's a very small subgenre of photography, but it's something I have done quite a bit with, and I have multiple cameras that shoot in that range, and I have written
Huh.
guides on the internet and show people how to process those photos. So
Wow.
And I have to go back to gaming for a second, because when you were mentioning that and some of the things you would get out of it, it made me think of a friend of mine who's really into esports. And you can now get actually a scholarship to go to college to be an esport athlete. What's your take on that? How do you feel about that?
is a question for me or Chad? Sorry.
Either one. I'm going to start with you,
that's
Jim.
Tremendous.
Yeah.
I actually think they are new career being created at all times through technology. Kind of just like a YouTuber, now it's a profession. Actually, my kid dreaming about being a YouTuber, and same thing. And I think esports, somebody who essentially earn a living playing games. I mean, a lot of things we do, our parents probably found weird. A lot of things my kids did, I still find it weird, but I have open enough mind to say, yeah, maybe that will be a thing. And I think gaming probably is one
Yeah,
of
for
them.
sure.
Because my understanding from listening to my kids, there are more people watches how games are being played than some sports.
Yeah, no, I've got a 10-year-old and 15-year-old, and they would, if they're just left to their devices on YouTube, they'll watch other people playing video games.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well, Greg, I think I told you this, but I went to a League of Legends match when we were in Seoul, and there were probably 12,000 people at the League of Legends match. It was in a giant basketball arena, and boy, did I stick out like a sore thumb. It was mostly 15 to 25-year-old Koreans there, and then this old white guy, but yeah, it was phenomenal. And also on that same subject of games, so I just started gaming again a little bit with my three boys. We're playing Baldur's Gate, and so we've got a campaign we started, and I hadn't gamed for real in probably 20 years, and it's been a great way to reconnect with my kids. So you talked, Jim, about reconnecting and using it in a different way of being social. Well, it's like, okay, I got, I'm sitting here in my office. My son is across the hall. Thank goodness, because he has to run back across the hall to help me about 3 times every session when I can't find a button or something. Right. And then I got a son in Kansas City and one across the other side of North Carolina. So yeah, and it's just a great way to reconnect with these guys. We've been having a great time. So yeah,
that's cool.
And I played Warcraft. That was the last time I really gamed was Warcraft in the mid-90s. It was a little different than it is now.
Well, that's all I've got for you, Jim. Chad, is there anything else that you wanted to discuss today?
No, Jim, I really appreciate it, man. I've known you for so many years, and I felt like I knew you well, and I think I did, but I learned so much about you today, both professionally and personally, and I feel very fortunate to call you one of my allies as far as the work allies. We've certainly had each other's backs over the years in different ways, and yeah, just really excited to see what's coming in the future for the pharmaceutical industry, for BMS, and for our relationship.
Absolutely, Chad. Thank you so much for inviting me, Greg. And I had a lot of fun, and it's really enjoyable talking to both of you. Chad, I will go one step further. I count you as professional friends I have in the industry, and it is very hard to be in this field, to be a scientist, but it's the people that make it worthwhile.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed talking to both of you. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
It was an honor and a pleasure. It was great to meet you and get to know you.
Thank you, Greg.
Jim. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Chad. Have a good one.